Up until I was 14, I knew a number of specific things about my dad. I knew that his name was Lanny Myers, which was really confusing. Lanny was short for Lancelot, which is a French name, and he's a Jewish boy. And his two younger brothers were named Kenneth and Richard. And I knew he was the oldest of three, and that he grew up in Flatbush, which was this far-off land in this far-off place called Brooklyn, which, like, for anybody who grew up in Manhattan in the 70s and 80s, like, no other boroughs existed, you know? I mean, really, like, unless you were going to Coney Island to ride the Cyclone, or you took the number 7 train to Flushing, Queens, to Shea Stadium to see the Mets just break your heart, or... I knew that he was a composer, and he started off playing piano in the pit for Broadway shows, and that at 8:15 on August 25th, 1964, he was just beginning the opening number of Around the World in 80 Days at the moment that I was being born. I knew that he left my mother and me when I was 3. I didn't know why he left, but I knew that he gave her half the money he made each week, and only learned years later that he would hang out on 10th Avenue after 5 p.m. when all the food vendors would return their carts to get whatever extra food they had, and that he really never thought about it. It was just what you did. I knew that per their visitation agreement that he would pick me up once a week on a Wednesday or Saturday from one of the various sublets or hotels that we lived in until we got a stable apartment. I knew that his sense of humor was corny as hell, and that he was an excellent cartoonist, and that he'd draw these cartoons for me, these really corny, jokey ones, like a chicken cooking Colonel Sanders in a pot, and it would make me laugh, like just watching it happen. And my sex talk involved like all these little sperm that looked like Pepperidge Farm goldfish. Right? They were like chasing after this egg that had these big eyelashes and this coquettic grin. She was just like, oh, oh, oh. And, it was like, and he would make all my food talk. Like when I would get a hot dog on the street, like I'd bring it to my mouth and he'd start making it beg for like his life. He's like, no, don't eat me, no. And I'd bite down just to spite him. And he'd be like, ow, I'm dying. And he took me to like a bunch of adult movies. Like, I saw Clockwork Orange in 2001 when I was like 10, okay? Yeah, and I mean, all I wanted to do was see Kung Fu movies. Like, all I wanted to do was sit in a theater and watch Bruce Lee, like, eat a frog, like in a Chinese Connection. And so he would take me to all these films, right, and he'd just fall asleep. He'd take a nap. And so I knew he loved me. I knew that. But I wasn't really sure that he wanted to be my father, because he was so quiet. He was almost silent. I mean, he was soft-spoken, but he was also quiet. Like, I mean, we'd be around, all my friends would come up to me after he was around and be like, what's up with your dad? He like doesn't talk. And I'd say, yeah, you know, he's shy, right? I'd try to make some excuse, but that doesn't make any sense to me as a kid, because he wasn't shy when he was behind the piano. No, he was like big and buoyant and playful, and he played in his honky-tonk style like Randy Newman, and he made those keys talk like the way the hot dogs did, and he was so joyous, and you can't watch him play without being happy, so he can't be shy. I mean, I was shy, and I talked too much, right? Because silence was a problem. It meant there was something wrong. It was awkward, and many of our visits, more than half of them, started off with just him and me sitting in a coffee shop, and we'd start off talking about the same 7 or 8 things. It was like a list. Like, I would tell him, how are you? How's your mom? How was school? And I'd say, fine, everything's good, and I'd try to make him feel better or not worry about me until we ran out of things to say, and then we'd sit for the remainder of the time and eat in silence. So it was pretty clear to me that he loved me, but he didn't really want to be there. You know, I was an obligation. Now, at that time or earlier, my favorite TV show was The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which, if you don't know, was this sitcom about this widower was played by Bill Bixby, and he had a little, like 8-year-old kid who was really precocious, who was spend all of his time trying to fix him up again, to like be a matchmaker. And it wasn't because he wanted another mom, it was because he wanted his dad to be happy. And it always started off with them, the two of them walking on a beach or in a park in like a silhouette, and then in a voiceover, Eddie would ask him a question like, Dad, why do people say one thing and then do another? And then that would be the theme of the episode, right? And then after it played out, they would be walking again on a beach or in a park, and they would kind of wrap up whatever happened during that time. But they talked so much, and they held hands, and like for the longest time as a little kid, that's all I wanted was to walk in the park with my dad. And he used to go back and forth to Los Angeles from New York for work, and when I was 14, he gave me the keys to his apartment on Perry Street in the West Village, and he was really excited. He was like, these are yours. When I'm away, this is your apartment. Okay, you can do whatever you want. You can bring girls here. And I mean, this was amazing for a kid who grew up in Manhattan. And whenever he was out of town, I would just run down there and I would go through all of his stuff. I mean, like I would open up all the spices and what's in the fridge and like all the toiletries and stuff, like looking for clues as to like who this guy was, you know? And one Saturday afternoon, in the middle of the day, I'm sitting cross-legged on this rug, and there's like all these books and records that are like spread out, and I'm trying to make sense of this album. I'm listening to this song called Atomic Dog, and these weird sounds were coming out by this band called Parliament Funkadelic. And I found this big sketchbook, and I opened it up, and it was unruled, so it was just like drawings and stream of consciousness and like poems, and like there's a little paragraph there, and it said, the morning session was terrible. The charts were great. It was exactly what they asked for, and each time I'd give it to them and they'd change it, and nothing was good, and they weren't satisfied, and I was letting them down, and then on top of that, in the middle, I had to leave and go pick up Jonathan, and we sat in a coffee shop for an hour in silence. And it was the best part of my day. So, all those coffee shops, and those awkward silences that went on forever, all those movies that he slept through, he was enjoying himself. All those like adult movies and books that he gave me like Breakfast of Champions when I was 10, like they weren't because he didn't want a kid around, but because he thought of me as someone who could understand, who he could learn from, who could spend time with, experience life with. I wasn't an obligation, I was his friend. As I struggle each day to quiet my mind and embrace silence, I retrace the handwriting in that book, and I always hear the theme song from that TV show.